Good morning, everyone. Today on Perspectives, if you haven't heard yet, we've got the full story for you today of Clotilda, the exhibition at the Africatown Heritage House. The Clotilda story has gotten, of course, a lot of national and international attention in recent years, following the relocating of the sunken ship's remains in the Mobile River roughly 4 years ago by Ben Raines. The vessel illegally brought 110 captives, men, women, and children from Africa to Mobile, 52 years after the United States government had outlawed the international slave trade. You may remember that the Clotilda's journey and story all started as a bet by a Mobile businessman. Now, several books and documentaries have recorded the story of the captives of the Clotilda, and today there's now a place to visit, to see, read, and hear their story, and about where they built a life and legacy, Africatown. The Africatown Heritage House, built in fact newly built in the community where it shares the name, is a nearly 5,000 square feet facility that houses Clotilda the exhibition. The curators say that the exhibition is a rich, multi-sensory space, dense with compelling stories and images. Expect to see and hear stories of individuals, their histories, their families, their resilient spirit. From the captives' West African beginnings to their settlement of Africatown, and to the future of this historic community. Our guest this morning on Perspectives, Dr. Meg McCrummon Fowler, History Museum of Mobile Director, and Jessica Fairley, the Africatown Heritage House Manager. When Perspectives continues, we'll hear from our guest this morning all about Clotilda, the exhibition at the Africatown Heritage House. It's being called by one very well-respected national publication the best museum opening in 2023. We'll be right back after this quick break. Welcome back, and this morning, as we mentioned, Dr. Meg Fowler, or actually Dr. Meg McCrummon Fowler. We like to always add that part in there. Love your dad, by the way. And of course, she is the History Museum of Mobile Director. And Ms. Jessica Fairley is also here with us this morning, and Ms. Fairley is the Africatown Heritage House Manager. Ladies, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Some exciting things have happened here in the last week or so, but this started a few years ago. Why don't we sort of start at that point, because a lot of people may not know the complete story, and once you heard about the rediscovery of the ship's remains, what happened back then?
At that moment in 2019, the History Museum said, how can we help? What can we do to help tell this story? We're here, we're local on the ground, perhaps we could curate an exhibition. And at that point, the Alabama Historical Commission, who is the steward of what's in state waters, including the Clotilda shipwreck, we approached the Alabama Historical Commission and created a partnership. They agreed to give us the objects on loan. And from there, we started looking for a space. And we said, from the beginning, if the History Museum is going to be involved in this project, it's very important that the exhibition be located in Africatown. That when visitors go to see this exhibition that is still an idea on the back of a napkin at this point, that they learn about the story in the community to which the story belongs. And so we were looking for a space, and that's where Commissioner Ludgood stepped in and just incredibly agreed to build Africatown Heritage House with support from the city.
Now, at that point now, did you initiate the dialogue with Commissioner Messiria Ludgood, or did she reach out to you? How did that?
There were a lot of dialogues happening at the same time. A lot of people looking for kind of what the next step in telling this story would be. I will say it is the only time, and we were having this conversation and realized how this would come together. It's the only time I've ever had a room spin when she said, I can do this for you. So, I mean, we're so grateful for the support of Commissioner Ludgood and the county that have really created this facility. The History Museum's role is to curate the exhibition that's inside, and then to operate the exhibition now going forward. So it's the fourth site operated by the History Museum.
Yeah, so there's a very strong partnership here when you mention the state as well as the county, and the city's involved as well. Right?
The city of Mobile and the county have jointly funded Heritage House. I think that this is one of the special things about this project, is that there is support from the local Africatown community. We worked very closely with descendants in curating this exhibition, and those partnerships with descendants, particularly the Clotilda Descendants Association, really shaped kind of actively created contributions to the exhibition, but shaped the approach at every turn. For example, one of the things we heard from descendants over and over is that they wanted a tangible connection to Benin, to what is present-day Benin.
Right.
And so the first thing visitors see when they walk in is a beautiful display of West African art objects that give a sense of the lives and culture of the various ethnic groups that would eventually be represented by the 110 on the Clotilda. So there's local partnerships, there's institutional partnerships, and then at the county, city, state levels, there's been an enormous amount of support to bring this to fruition.
And before we go too far into that direction, I want to bring Jessica in here to give us an idea of how you are in this equation now as the manager of the house itself.
So I came on board about 10 weeks ago, started at the beginning of May. And when I found out about the position, I knew that, you know, it was something. I was always involved in the Africatown community. My best friend is a descendant, so I've always, you know, been in and out of the community and kind of wanted to help and wanted to kind of do due diligence and give back. So when I saw the position was open.
How did you find it? How did you come across it?
My friend sent it to me, the descendant. She said, Jessica, I think you would be good for this. Why don't you apply? So I applied, and you know, they called me back, went through the whole process and all of that. But when I found out that I was coming aboard, I knew that it was going to be something that wasn't just a job for me, that this is a labor of love. This is, I consider myself an adopted descendant, a family member of Africatown. So I'm going to be an advocate for the community.
And I loved in your bio that talks about your grandmother who couldn't read, but yet she encouraged you and her other grandchildren. And what was the line she told you about the lion and the hunter?
Well, until the lion learns how to write, the hunter will always tell the story. So you have to learn how to read, you have to learn how to write, you have to tell your own story. And so that's something that I've always carried with me. That's why I ended up in communication. She used to make me read to her. And so from there, I learned to love reading, I learned to love writing, and here I am today.
Nothing like those grandmothers,
right?
Right. So how did we get the house built itself?
So Mobile County Commission led the effort, and again, there aren't enough ways to credit Merceria Ludgood for her role in this project and kind of persistently seeing it through step by step. At a point where it was substantially complete, and the county graciously involved the History Museum in the design process, particularly on the interior, to make sure it was a space that would function, you know, to house this exhibition.
And we're talking about nearly 5,000 square feet.
Exactly, exactly. And the exhibit itself is about 2,500 square feet. There are 6 galleries that visitors move through that tell this very complete story.
Now, Jessica, what was your feeling and impression the first time you got to go inside?
When I first went into the museum space, it was an empty space. Meg took me through before coming aboard. And when I went through the space, I think when we got to where she described the room where there's the wall of names, I became emotional because I knew what the descendants would feel when they went through that space just from her description. And my thoughts were correct because I was there on descendant night when all the descendants got to go through, and the emotions that I felt, I saw them go through as well. They had tears in their eyes. You can go through the books that they wrote their messages on to kind of give feedback, and they were so touched. So those were my feelings when I first went through.
Do we have on tape the two of you all standing there in an empty place with looking and pointing out where it's going to be?
Those are preserved only in our memory. That's right.
That would be excellent.
I remember that moment distinctly, though, yeah.
So when you were at that point to start bringing the different things in to create that atmosphere and environment, and talking to you all earlier, you sort of painted a picture for me that I can only imagine right now of what to expect once I get in. How did that part happen there to where you start seeing it come together? Did you have to design each section?
So this is part of what I'm so proud of the staff at the History Museum of Mobile. We have a really phenomenal curatorial team that designed this entirely in-house. And so these are, so on one hand, we have worked with experts around the country in the content and the curation and you know, Yoruba language specialists and West African art historians. And so we have international expertise, but we also have this extraordinary, talented curatorial staff right here in Mobile that designed everything from picking the paint colors, our curator of exhibitions, for example, picking paint colors, designing the molding on the floor. I mean, every aspect of the space is thoughtfully done to create a memorable experience. And what we find as museum curators is that when people have a memorable, perhaps an emotional experience with history in a space, that's where people learn something, and it becomes more meaningful and something that really gets carried with them. And that happens in the way that information is presented, but it also happens down to the smallest detail of what the floorboard molding looks like.
Yes, yes, that's critical. And even understand the exterior color of the Heritage House has some connection to the community as well, and we'll talk about that when we come back. We've got a lot more to share about the Heritage House as well as the Clotilda and how everything is coming together at this very special time. And we didn't mention the date also. We'll talk about that when we come back, of how right there to the day, so to speak, kicking things off. Well, our very special guest this morning talking about the Africatown Heritage House. We'll have more perspectives in just a moment. Welcome back. We're talking about the Africatown Heritage House and Clotilda the exhibition. A very special guest this morning, Dr. Meg McCrummon Fowler from the History Museum of Mobile. She is the director. And Ms. Jessica Fairley, she is the house manager of the Africatown Heritage House. We thank you both for being here this morning, and hopefully anyone who's been watching this first part, they're excited and they're about to make their reservations to get down there. Well, let's talk a little bit more about what to expect to see, because we talked about different types of visual and audio and ingredients in the mix of going in to see this. So let's start there and talk about what you mentioned, the beginnings of when walking in, that it's a very emotional time for some people. Why don't we start there?
So visitors learn the story from its West African origins through the last voyage of the ship. The heart of the exhibition is about the founding and establishment of Africatown, the remarkable achievements of those who were able to set down roots, establish schools, churches, all of those details. Towards the end of the exhibition, visitors then see the pieces of the shipwreck that have been recovered from the Mobile River, and those are on loan from the Alabama Historical Commission. There are other parts, there's videos, there's a media room that Jessica's doing a phenomenal job with. And so, you know, at every point through this, we want visitors to hear from primary sources. This is the best documented Middle Passage voyage. And so there's a large amount of primary sources that allow visitors, whether it's through audio, whether it's reading descriptions, seeing documents, signatures, land deeds, marriage licenses, really giving people a sense of the history at its very source.
Now, will we also get to hear some of Cudjo Lewis? Is that a part of this? Were you able to include that?
Yes, so what we've done is taken audio wands. So as you enter the museum, there's something called Call to Listen. And they are excerpts from the book Barracoon, where Cudjo Lewis tells his story from Africa over to American soil. So visitors to the museum can listen in, hear his experience, and I think it changes the dynamic because it takes them back into his perspective of things.
Right.
A very emotional piece.
Yeah. How old was he when he recorded that? He was up in age.
Yes, he was.
Exactly.
Yes, he was older.
So we were able to find a Yoruba voice actor who was able to read these transcripts, right, that Zora Neale Hurston had done the interviews when she visited all those years ago.
It's amazing how things have come around, and you all have brought all this together now with the museum right here in Mobile. Let me ask you a quick question before I lose this thought. Liverpool in London or in England is a place where there's a connection to Africatown. Are they aware now of what you all have put together here and just opened recently?
So there are some who have helped us make that connection. That is something we need to explore further, to be sure. But I am aware of that connection, and it's you know, I think really speaks to what an international story that this has been. It can, you know, we see it happening now in the international interest, but that's been the case for a very long time.
Very good. And they were waiting to sort of see what Mobile was going to do all these years, and of course you did some things at the museum, and now you've put an incredible, it sounds like, I'm waiting to see it myself, but it sounds like an incredible place. So walk us through now. We are at the front entrance and what we've seen there. What's the next step there inside?
So the next step is going into the West Origins room. So you would see the different artworks that Meg has described. From there, you're going to learn a little bit about the climate of the times, the politics of the time, and then going on to understand the bet that some, you know, say it was and some say it wasn't. But going on to understand that, and then the transatlantic slave trade. I think one of the most striking pieces to me is actually the life-size replica of a portion of the ship. And so I think it's very emotional when you see the size of the people compared to that portion of the ship and where they were stored. I think that's something that people are going to be shocked as to the life size and how the contractor was able to build that into the museum space. I think one of the most striking parts, I talked about the wall of names. So all of there are unknown names. So there are also people of the 110 that we know. So their names are interweaved in the wall, etched into glass, but it's interweaved into an audio piece that you hear the names of the descendants, but you hear those unknowns in a low tone. It is heart-wrenching, and it pulls at the emotion strings. And this is where a lot of the descendants, you know, get emotional, and you see a lot of tears flow in that space. So I think that is how the progress of the museum goes through, and those are the things that people can kind of expect as they enter that space.
I think you mentioned to me there's a place where you can sort of sit and collect and gather yourself after experiencing either the parts of the museum, the whole museum. I know it happened to me in Mississippi at the Civil Rights Museum. I could not go through all of the museum. I was just too emotionally affected by what I had seen. So that's another part, right?
Right.
Yeah, so one of the things that that Jessica is really helping us with is developing an oral history archive. And so, you know, I think the dream is that this grows over time and becomes a place where more and more stories from the community.
Right. And so we're calling it right now our AV/media room. But after you exit the exhibit, what do you do? Where do you leave your comments? Where do you gather your thoughts? So we're advising people to go into there, write down their thoughts, write down things that, you know, the feelings that they felt as they went through the museum, and also connect with the people of Africatown. So we have iPads with oral histories on them. You can kind of get in a zone and listen to those. There are documentaries that people are able to watch, whether they were created by National Geographic or local artists who created them. So we want people to see what's happening now with Africatown and where that's going to go in the future.
We've got about 2 minutes left, so we don't leave this part out. Tell us what we need to do to see and experience the museum, because there's limited space and some things that you all want to have in order so everyone can get the full value.
Right. So go to Clotilda.com, www.clotilda.com, and RSVP, reserve your spot. We're asking that people reserve their spot so that we can make sure they have a spot. Because of capacity, we have to enter people in at 20-minute intervals, and so we can only enter so many in within that time frame. So if you go online and reserve your spot, not only do you get to choose your date, you also get to choose that time, and it is your time. And once you're inside of the exhibit, you can stay as long as you want.
And how much is it?
Well, we want to remind everyone it's free to residents of Mobile County. There's a small admission charge for people who aren't residents, but even from Mobile County. We'll always accept donations.
And of course, I guess make sure you have your ID to show
Exactly.
proof of that. And what about groups? When people want to bring a large group, is it something different that they need to do?
So we're in the process of building out our group curriculum and how that's going to look, but groups are welcome to go online, book on Clotilda.com, and then we would accommodate them from there.
And for those who may not be fully aware exactly where the museum is, as well as where Africatown is, give us an idea of where on Winbush or Wimbush?
We're on Winbush,
Okay.
a few miles north, of course, of downtown Mobile, just right off 110. And the Heritage House is located in the heart of the historic Africatown community. Very important, as I mentioned, right adjacent to the Hope Community Center and to the Mobile County Training School.
Yeah, good location there, and plenty of parking space.
We have parking space, and we're also collaborating with the Hope Center. So if we have overflow, people are welcome to park at the Hope Center.
All right, ladies, we really appreciate your time today and sharing this exciting and just encouraging story of what has transpired the last 4 years. It's an incredible period of time.
Thank
We
you.
thank you both.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
right.
Thank you so much.
And of course, there's the information there for more about the Clotilda and the Africatown Heritage House. You see the address as well. We've got plenty of information available once you go to the website, as Ms. Fairley mentioned, so you won't have any problems there and make your reservation. And if you are a Mobile County resident, don't forget that it is free to you right now, so definitely take advantage of this world-class museum, receiving some very high marks already after just opening here in the last week. It's an incredible story for all of us to be very proud of. So if you miss any of the episodes, of course, of Perspectives, just go to our website or our YouTube page for more on the programs that you may have missed. I'm Eric Reynolds. You have a great week. We'll see you next time.